Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar about smart risk enterprise and the future of risk management. For this webinar today, I have three very knowledgeable panelists with me, and in a minute, I will invite them to introduce themselves. But before that, I would really like to invite the audience to ask us a lot of questions or make comments. We are watching it and we will refer back to it and we will answer the questions as we go along. So please shoot us questions. We really, really like that. On top of it, we will invite you to a couple of polls, and we hope you answer all of them very diligently too. It really helps us get some insights as well. And with that, I would like to invite all of our speakers to introduce themselves. And I would like to start with Lisa Palmgren, who is the Group CRO of Lundstør. And Lisa is unfortunately running into a firewall, so we don't see her video, but we will hear her voice. So Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Katja. And I'm glad it's a firewall and not an ordinary wall. So I've been with Lundstør the last 10 years. And just before that, I worked with the Swedish FSA, working with internal models for insurance. And previous to that, I used to work in Switzerland for Swiss Re. And I might just need to comment on that my main area that I focus on is rather on the insurance side than on the banking, even though Lundstør has both banking and insurance business.
Thank you, Lisa. With that, I hand over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Katja. So Jeremy Arnold, I'm the Chief Risk Officer for NatWest Markets. That's the investment banking side of the NatWest Group. Prior to my role here, I was the Regional Chief Risk Officer for Nomura. So I've spent my career around markets businesses and investment banks. Started out on the trading side and then moved into market risk and then onto the CRO side of things. So looking forward to a good discussion with people today about what our future holds.
Thank you, Jeremy. And last but not least, I hand over to Vijay.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Vijay Raghavan Venkatraman, I'm called Vijay. I head globally the Risk and Regulatory Compliance Strategic Unit for Banking, Financial Services and Insurance vertical at TCS. Before we actually get on to the conversation, I just wanted to use this opportunity to mention that we are pleased to share that one of our recent global research and survey with the CROs across 120 plus institutions on the future of risk enterprise. That report is kind of live today, and please feel free to download and access and read the report. It is available in this platform. This research actually looked at key considerations for future of risk enterprise, impediments that need to be managed to drive successful transition, and the role of digital in driving future enterprise, and many other very interesting insights all of us wanted to hear from the CRO and risk leaders. So kind of that insights and the way forward is what is actually bundled into this report across retail, universal banks, insurance, buy side and sell side. So please feel free to download and read at your leisure. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Vijay. And with that, let's jump in straight into the discussion. When this webinar was planned, we didn't even know how uncertain the times are for society and for organizations. We have learned so much during the pandemic to be agile and flexible, but nobody would have thought a month ago that we are now in a war in Europe. So CRO's role is more important than ever. And I really would like to ask you, as experts and CROs yourself, how can you as a CRO help the business in these times? And what are the changing priorities for you? So with that, let's start with Jeremy.
Thanks, Katja. Well, Yeah, these have been, look, they're very troubled times for our friends and human colleagues in Eastern Europe. But it's interesting times from being a CRO as well, and the challenges that faces. Within my role, I also ask the CROs at NatWest also encompass financial crime, compliance, conduct, etc. So there's been an interesting one about how quickly can we get the sanctions that come out from the different regulators and governments around the world, how quickly can we get them enacted to make sure that that happens? The challenges you face are things like on ruble payments, making sure that you're not then not only transacting with a sanctioned entity, but are any of the transactions you're doing getting routed through a sanctioned entity? So actually really understanding your process from front to back and who is involved in that process becomes really quite important. And I think another thing that this is highlighted is we're quite good at knowing our first order risks. So have we got exposure to a Russian counterpart? But then how good are we at knowing how much those other counterparts have exposure to Russia, for example? We may know some where, BP had a 20% stake in Gazprom, etc. But how really well do we know our customers? And I think it's things like this, and we'll come on to talking about digital, etc. later, but it's data that's the key. And getting your data right, having good quality data behind you, the better quality that data, the quicker you can make good quality decisions. And I think that's where a CRO can add real value. The business needs to run at pace. They need to potentially change direction relatively quickly. And they need to implement things relatively quickly. But I think a CRO's role here is to stand back, not panic, and be that sense of calm in the room, making sure we're asking the right questions and challenging the business in the right way, but with the eye constantly on what is the longer term outcome that we're trying to get to as a firm and as a group. And I think that's key. And that's where, for me, a CRO really earns their keep and adds value to the firm. We're not there to drive business growth per se, but what you want to do is be there to ensure that the business is thriving so it can drive growth in the future by not blowing itself up when the problems happen. Now, you also want to make sure that you're in a good place before the problems happen, so that if an event occurs in the world, that you're well prepared for it. You can either react quickly or you can mitigate that risk. So, if you were to describe the perfect CRO, they'd have a crystal ball in front of them and be able to predict the future. But given we can't do that, you need to work out what the range of outcomes are that could affect your business and decide what you do in those different events. And I think having those discussions in the room ahead of time, and then being able to, as I say, be that sane, be that calm influence in the room when things happen, and just making sure that you are probing, asking the right questions. When people say they've done something, it's right, well, how do we know that this has been done? You say it's been done, but has it been done properly? Has this been implemented? There are other things like, for us, we had IT wanted to do a disaster recovery test, I think 3 days into the crisis. We said, look, that wouldn't really be a sensible thing to do. It was like, oh yeah, but nothing will be affected. Everything will be fine. But why take that risk? There's no point in taking that risk at the moment. We can do it a month later in the year when actually the impact, if that tiny chance of something going wrong did happen, would actually then have a much less impact, much smaller impact. So it's calling out some of those things. And I think for all of the smart people we have working around us, there are a lot of people that understand probability and a lot of people that understand loss, but most people don't put those two together very well. And whilst they may say, oh, but there's hardly any chance of that happening, if something's then going to be a catastrophic event, you can't afford for that to happen at all. And again, it's making sure that people are really thinking about things properly, and you challenging the business, well, not just the business, but the other areas, whether it's the operations function or IT, to do the right thing and to not make mistakes. I think that's really the right thing for us to be doing, especially at the moment.
Thank you, Jeremy. So let me turn to Lisa. Lisa, you're even closer physically than all of us to what's going on with the war. But I don't want you to just focus on that kind of risk, but more to pick up on what Jeremy said. He mentioned the CRO needs to have dialogue and needs to challenge the business. He mentioned the importance of connecting the dots. What else would you say is important for the CRO as a value add to the business?
I think what's really become apparent in both during Corona and the crisis that we go through now, or the situation that we go through now, is not only to do the analysis for one factor at a time, but the dependencies of the different factors and how the system effects and the knock-on effects look. And I think that's where something that we can contribute as well, to ensure that you don't do risk management in silos, but you actually look at the bigger picture and look at all the different factors and how they drive each other. So I think that's one point where you can contribute. Of course, we have aspects of just like going back to the mental health of employees and other things that are not the normal risks that you work with every day, because then they are not an issue. But during certain crisis, they can, of course, become very crucial.
That is an excellent point, Lisa, that you're bringing up. I mean, like, the role of the CRO becomes so much broader than it used to be. So let's ask Vijay then. Vijay, is there anything which we should add to these changing priorities of the CRO and of the risk management function?
What we heard from Jeremy and Lisa, and sums it up. Just few maybe additional points, or just maybe a different phrase. I think just in terms of 3-4 very important priorities, right? The current dynamics and forward looking. One is all about, we heard both Jeremy and Lisa mentioning about stay connected with the customer. So delivering positive, consistent customer outcomes. The hardships times with as part of the pandemic of the current geopolitical event, right? I think ability to deliver that positive, consistent. We heard the Jeremy and Lisa mentioning about data quality, big picture, holistic view, and agility in risk management, right? How quickly we deliver, how quickly we respond to emerging scenarios, right? Whether it is kind of rolling out some credit decisioning strategies, coming out of a market, right? Looking at implementing the sanctions regime, etc. But that agility, that's a focus area. And the other is all about right? Ensuring that the economic critical functions deliver in this extreme times that we are in the last 2 years with pandemic and geopolitical events as well. In priorities for that idea, right? We see a diversified set of KPIs today, which is reflecting CRO's broader impact on an organization and the evolution which is occurring in the CRO role. So, that's today what we observe. And as the CROs and the institutions are looking to create that future of risk enterprise, trying to,
Okay, Vijay, you are breaking up a little bit.
Very rightly, Jeremy mentioned.
Okay.
Is it okay now?
Vijay,
yeah.
Yes, and maybe you turn off your virtual background, maybe it takes some bandwidth and so on. But this is the right time for our first poll. So Anna, if you could launch the first poll for the audience, and I really hope that you're all participating in it. And the questions are, and you can have multiple choice here, is, so what are the key outcomes a CRO is expected to drive for the future of the risk enterprise and risk management? And you have the choices of providing enterprise assurance, driving business agility, delivering business resiliency, and maybe creating new revenue streams. So please work with the poll, give us your answers, while we will here discuss a little bit longer, so you have the time to give us your insights through this poll. And with that, I would like to go back a little bit to Lisa while we're waiting for the poll. Oh my God, is it done already? But let's give them a little bit more time. Lisa, you mentioned mental health as a risk, which even the CRO, not just HR, needs to look at. Can you expand on that a little bit more while we're waiting for more people to participate?
Yeah, so connecting over to the question as well, I think that one of the main roles of the CRO going forward is to support risk-taking or decision-taking in a numerous of different fields, not only like the classical market risk field and so forth. And of course, if you see that, for example, mental health or cyber or whatever stands in the way for delivering on your business plan, those are also risks that have to be addressed. So it's a broad variety of risks, and it's not about minimizing risk as always. It's rather to provide the ability to take risk and take risk in the right way.
And you're very right that, frankly, I mean, like our employees are a large section, I mean, like they enable us to take the risks. So thank you for that. Jeremy, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a lot as well, but we've sort of added it all into the broader people risk agenda, and it's a piece of that. And I think whilst this, as Lisa said, has it become our responsibility, or is it still sort of an HR responsibility, or is it all of ExCo's responsibility to be looking at well-being? And I think that's one of the things with the CRO. If you look back, 30 years, the CROs didn't exist. It might have been about 30 years ago, the first person coined the phrase CRO. But as that role's expanded and gone from reporting into a CFO to having a junior seat on the exec to actually being a senior member of the executive, I think your ability to influence there has then changed significantly as well. And I think it's not only in your role as a CRO, I think it's in your role as a senior member of the firm to be looking at things like the well-being aspect of it. And there are many other aspects, I think, beyond well-being as well. I mean, I sponsor our well-being network, and it's clear that, people have suffered significantly through this. And as you say, if you want the business to thrive, you need to get the best out of your staff. We are a people business. The financial services industry is a people business and relationship business. And if your people aren't thriving, your business isn't going to thrive. So, making sure that is looked after properly, I think Lisa's completely right. It is a key thing. It is a key risk to us, and we need to manage it appropriately.
Thank you for that. And let us now quickly look at the answers of the poll. So the answers we received are the biggest one are tied. So business resiliency and enterprise assurance, are the two answers which are tied. Interestingly enough, business agility still has above 50% response rate, and creating new revenue streams, which is not surprising, has a fairly low rate. So the first two, enterprise assurance and resiliency, both of them I would look at as a classic jobs of the risk management function, but business agility still is a fairly big chunk in the answers here. And actually, I think that makes sense when we are thinking of enabling, like our way forward. We are changing the way we work as we speak. Vijay, would you like to comment on the poll?
Katya, I'm not actually surprised by the outcome. Enterprise assurance is a needed brake and accelerator to fuel the growth. I should completely agree with that in terms of the key priorities and outcomes. Resiliency has come to the forefront, and the CRO function needs to drive a holistic resiliency to protect critical economic functions. We have that pandemic and the current, agility is again, equally important. We talked about the ability to quickly use an enabler. Revenue stream, I think is not surprising, but in terms of externalization of some of services may catch up, but at this point in time, I agree, and it's not surprising in terms of the outcome.
Okay. Vijay, you're still a little bit wobbly, so if you can do anything to make your connection even more resilient, that would be great. But with that, let us move thank you, not to the next poll, but to the next question. And I would like to start with Lisa here. So Lisa, we have new challenges, and both of you, and all three of you talked about it, but what kind of capabilities does that mean do we need, both as CROs, but more importantly, in the risk function, and maybe for the whole of the business with regards to risk management? What is your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you ask for capabilities. And I think capabilities is definitely something where we need change capabilities. But we still have to start with the culture, I think, to be able to just go to the new capabilities without having the culture with you. You'll have a hard time to manage to get any change through. So I think that you really need an openness to do a different type of risk management than you've done historically. And once you have the acceptance of that and a culture not only within the risk management function, but also broader within your business to change something, I think that if we just look at the type of people that we want to employ now, it's more the type of flexible mindset that we go more for the person than there's a resume. So we want someone that does not need to hold on to regulation, for example, but can do flexible and clever analysis, more or less no matter what the topic is. So we needed more like Swiss Army type of nice people than the historical type of MP that we have. And of course, the capabilities are the analytical type of capabilities and the flexibility. So also the data, computing, programming, to give us the tools to be flexible.
Thank you, Lisa. So practically, we need a person who is both well-educated and knowledgeable, but able to act flexibly and in an agile way. So Jeremy, how do we do that in particular when we may have had in the past maybe people who were more comfortable in more cautious risk-taking or more stable environments?
Yeah, that's interesting. We're either, that could be the case, and also people who are more comfortable with the numbers rather than the people. I think a lot of risk professionals you'll have met in the past. I think you'd argue they're very comfortable sitting down, discussing numbers, discussing formulas. But going back to the well-being discussion, if you're actually then trying to discuss how someone's feeling, that's going to be a very different matter. And historically, probably not been one of the main skill sets of a risk function, and definitely not of a CRO. But I think, look, they're skills we've all got to learn. And if we're not good at them, we need to learn how to do it. You can see that the people, Archegos would be a brilliant example of, if you worked flexibly and diligently and quickly, you got out of the risks. Those firms that were more bureaucratic and maybe somewhat blinded by the size of the risk ended up taking large losses because they took a lot longer to get out of the positions. And it's number one, having the right mindset. I think it's protecting the long-term interests of the firm, but also being comfortable making decisions. A lot of people still want to go back to committees and don't want to be personally accountable for the decisions. And I think that's one thing I really like with the SMR in the UK is the personal accountability, because it doesn't matter. Like today, we had our risk committee, but it's that committee is an advisory committee to me on the decisions that I make. If you try and do committee by decision, you will waste time potentially when you need to be making quick decisions. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have those committees and form opinions, but sometimes you need a quick decision on things. And I think it's that mindset. And there are, again, some people in the industry, it's like, these are the rules that we've written, and you've got to stay exactly within them. And sometimes they need to be bent a bit. The guardrails need to just bend outwards slightly. That doesn't mean you go completely off them, but there are times you need to get things done, and that's when I think the moral fortitude of the CRO comes to the fore. And actually, it helps, as we were talking about earlier, the greater the level of apparent seniority of the CRO within the firm allows you to get things done quicker. Even calling together your heads of trading, your heads of businesses, and the CEO to say, right, there's something's happening here. We need to make a decision on this right now. In days gone past, I don't think that would have happened as easily as it happens now. So I think, to me, I think we've started well on the journey. It's taken quite a long time, but we need to complete it. So getting into an environment where CROs, A, make the decisions, B, have the authority and capability of pulling those people together to then get the advice to make the decisions, but also challenge the business and the business leaders to make those decisions when they have to in the time that they have to do it. So it's all of those things combined, I think.
You mentioned Archegos, and may I add another capability which Lisa kind of hinted on, which may help in preventing risk, and it's a capability and maybe the mindset of speaking up when you see problems, because most risks have a longer time to become apparent than it looks like sometimes. I mean, like, nothing ever happens overnight. So what do you think? And let's start maybe with Lisa very quickly. What do you think about speaking up? What do you do to create a culture of speaking up? And then Jeremy, what's your opinion on that before we turn to Vijay? Lisa?
It's a very interesting question, Katja, and of course it's very important to get, in order to be able to get the right risk culture. We're actually doing that type of rollout now as well within our company to put more courage into our culture. So it's also something that's being seen, and it goes hand in hand with working more agile, because actually you have to distribute decision making, and then also distribute the responsibility. And to do that, of course, you also have to have the courage and the means to be able to do that. Yes, definitely agree. And we're working on it. So.
No.
Yes.
Sorry, Lisa. I think you've hit on a good point here, because if you look at we should be fairly good at the quantitative risks, the market risk, the credit risk, etc. And if you read the Paul Weiss report on Archegos with Credit Suisse, they saw that the warning flags were there. So this comes back to a cultural issue. How do you create the culture where A, risk has an appropriate voice, and B, is listened to, and people are taking accountability, people are accountable and responsible. And I think this is actually quite key. And I do think that this is a key role for the CRO to play. But this isn't just them with the rest of the exec. This is actually working with the board as well. This is one where creating that culture where it is appropriate for people to speak up, for people to trust the speak up framework that you have as well. And I think at NatWest, I think we've got a very good framework for that. But I still hear people occasionally say, but I don't want to raise the issue in case my boss finds out. And that's just clearly the wrong situation to be in. And you need to be able to scotch those things. It can be completely anonymous. If people want to remain anonymous, it can be. But the lack of belief in that means that people don't raise as many issues as they should do. So I think there's constant work that needs to be done, from the speak up champion on the board through to the exec, etc., to get that message out there that it is. Not only is it the right thing to speak up, people are expected to speak up when they see things that aren't going correctly, or if they see poor behaviour, or if they, they're seeing issues that they're challenged by, rather than just saying, "Oh, this is the wrong firm to me," and to walk away. I think it's everyone's moral duty. If they're being paid by the firm, they're an employee of the firm, they're colleagues of others there, they need to speak up to help make the firm a better place. But it is, I think it comes from top down to create that culture, create that freedom and ability for people to be able to speak up freely and without retribution.
Very true. So let's give Vijay a chance. The other two spoke a lot about the soft skills and culture as well. What would you like to add in terms of capabilities that are needed for the future of risk management? You're on mute, Vijay. We can't hear you. If not, while you sort that out, we may actually go to the poll, and you'll have the chance while we're waiting for the poll to then give us your insight. We still can't hear you. So, Anna, if you could launch the next poll. And the next poll is, what do you, audience, see as the key challenges in driving the future of risk enterprise? Again, you have multiple choices, and you can choose closer collaboration across the function, something Jeremy mentioned, lack of integration of business strategy and risk appetite, lack of measurable KPIs, and limited digital capabilities in the risk function. So feel free to choose any of them or all of them at the same time. And in the meantime, I would like to go back to Jeremy's point about the creating a speak up culture needs to be lived and role modeled from the top down. I agree. However, I would actually say in most corporates currently, there is not enough emphasis on that. And what I mean is it's not enough to state we want everyone to speak up, but it actually needs to be encouraged pretty much every day. And you need to look deeper. I give you an example. If you're my boss and you ask me, well, do you see any concerns? And I'm going to go, not really. I'd expect you to dig a bit deeper. So, Jeremy, what do you think about that? And maybe Lisa has some ideas about it as well, how to create a culture which is truly about speaking up and not just lip service.
Yeah, but I think that that's creating the culture of challenge, people being open to challenge. Look, I'm sure we've all had bosses in the past who you challenged them, they didn't like it, and made you either feel small or shouted at you, whatever. That's not the way to get the best outcomes. The best outcomes is to have the debate, to challenge. If I ask one of my team members or one of my colleagues, is there a problem somewhere? I don't want to hear, no, everything's all right, when actually something is going wrong. And we do try and live that. And when something goes wrong, it's not blame, it's right. Okay, so what do we need to do? Who do we need to get together in the room to come and fix this, rather than then try and have that blame culture? There may be a reason to blame someone at some point in the future and hold someone to account. That's different. But the initial problem needs to get fixed. And it's then that rallying round and solving it as a team. So I think part of it is creating that team environment, people feeling part of the team, engaged. And I think that's all part of the culture of the firm. And I think just going back to the speak up a moment ago, I challenge and my board challenges when we don't have many speak up incidences in the quarter. So not having any is just as bad as having too many. Having too many means that you've got too many things going wrong. Not having any could be that you've got the perfect culture, but given no one has the perfect culture and nothing's ever going wrong, it would suggest that people are too afraid to speak up. But that, for me, is just as bad. So it's that constant challenging, and yeah, that real that provision of service, that advertising of service, that this is it's, you know, whether you need to outsource it to make it independent so people really do feel as though it is anonymous, etc. There are lots of things you can do, I think, but I also agree it needs to be constantly reinforced. It's not just we do this once at the startup of, say, a Speak Up campaign and leave it. But I also think it's more than just that independent speak up. I think this is speaking up in terms of being able to challenge your boss, having the debate, etc., and getting into people's mindset that it's okay to challenge. It's good to challenge. In fact, it's it is your responsibility to challenge.
Fair point. And we do have Vijay. No, Vijay is gone. So let's ask Lisa. Maybe Lisa has some more insights with regards to how to create speaking up, because I know that you worked on risk culture. So Lisa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, of course, you can never change culture overnight, and I think that's important to have with you. So what you do is of course to also show that there will be effect when people do speak out. So if people speak out, take care of that and do something with it, and also just knowing that that your team members always know that you have their back, and of course also doing that by speaking up on your own. And I think another way to encourage that type of culture is to speak out on your own, even when ideas or thoughts are not completely 100% correct yet or worked out, just to ask for insights and get a good exchange between yourself and others.
Thank you, Lisa. Shall we try one last time to get Vijay back into the discussion?
Yeah, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we do. Great. So what kind of capabilities are we still missing for the future of risk management?
I think Jeremy and Lisa covered quite a bit of the software capabilities. Few other things I thought I just wanted to kind of add on, Katya, is, in terms of the early warning insights as a capability, right? We heard, Jeremy mentioning about quick decision making, very strong data coming in, right? I think very imperative is to build those early warning insights today with a lot of digital advancements. It's something which can be delivered. Real-time risk monitoring, as we see so much happening today around us, right? In terms of, the supply chain issues, the macroeconomic movements, and so many other aspects of it. How do we, have those capability to monitor the risk real time? And the other aspect, which I also heard Jeremy and Lisa mentioning, but is about quantifying emerging risk today, right? So a lot of new things happening, cyber risk, we have climate change impact, technology risk, a lot of digital channel engagements today leading to technology risk, AI risk, etc. So how do we, manage, quantify emerging risk as a capability? The other aspect which I thought we'll quickly mention is about the simulation capabilities, right? So we would want to have simulate near real time, whether it be credit decisioning strategies, whether it's received well by the customers in the market, does it cannibalize my existing strategy? Is my portfolio getting impacted? So such capabilities which allow, simulation of production and help you with strategy recommendations. So these are certain things which we kind of extended to what Jeremy and Lisa mentioned, in addition to risk culture, right, and quick decision making, the right authority. Fantastic point that Jeremy mentioned. Two other quick things I wanted to also highlight is how do we, as a capability, enable CRO function to leverage alternate data. Today there is a lot of unbanked segment, right? Credit invisible kind of a segment. So how do we use alternate data to bring them on and also deliver some very significant customer experience? These are some of the few critical capabilities associated, in terms of the future of this.
Well, very well. Thank you, Vijay, for your insights here. And Anna, can we close the poll? Have we seen already some votes on that second poll? Oh, perfect. So really, the lack of integration of the business strategy and the risk appetite, that is not a surprise, and I totally agree with that. I would have actually even added lack of integration of strategy and maybe the risk culture on top of it, but that is on the top. Let's see, is there any surprise here for you, Lisa, in the poll? Or anything you want to mention?
I think I think I'm not surprised of the second one. I'm also glad that people did dare to say that, because I think for quite a few years, if someone went through and asked, like, yeah, do you have a connection between your strategy and your risk appetite? And you go, of course I do. But when you really look at it, how well integrated are the two? So that is something that we've been working on quite heavily the last 4 years to get a very good integration between the two. I do think that digital capabilities are very, very interesting. We are not there yet because I think there's so many other things that have to be in place first. Before that is your biggest problem, so to say. There are too many other issues right now, I feel, going on in the surrounding environment. KPIs, I think, is interesting as well, because it's not only they should be measurable, but you have to ensure that your KPIs or KRIs are actually the correct KRIs. Are they really capturing the true risk that you're going to manage? Or did you just choose your risk indicators given what was available, or even worse, what gave the right numbers? So to get something that's measurable, that's easy enough. To get something that's measurable and relevant, that's work.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, for your insights here. And before we move on to our next question, I would actually like to repeat some of the questions from the audience here. And you guys can pick them up, just raise your interest here. Let us start here with the question of Sudala Mutu, and he talks about the current state of the geopolitical events. So what do you think will be the major challenge, the major next challenge, or the major current challenge for the CRO to manage risks from this event? So who wants to take that from you?
I'm happy to, Katja. Because actually, just been discussing this in our risk committee this afternoon. And look, there's a serious threat, especially across Europe, probably to a lesser extent the US, that we have stagflation. We haven't had stagflation broadly for a long time, and I think the lack of understanding of it, and in financial markets, very underdeveloped financial markets, the last time this happened in sort of the 1970s. And I think dealing with that is going to be pretty difficult. I think looking at the longer term impacts of higher inflation, people have, the research I've seen so far has focused a lot on Russia and the impacts on Russia and not being able to export. But if you look at what Ukraine does, Ukraine used to produce enough food for 600 million people from a country of 43 million. That's 550 million people not being fed from Ukraine. What happens to that food? What happens to the ability for people to feed themselves? That will generally cause higher prices. But that will then feed through to the poorer, less developed countries are going to suffer most from this. What impact is that going to have on the global economy, on the global balance of power? Does it cause more civil unrest, etc.? And I think it's these second, third order effects. I think that's where the CROs can really add the value, to really be thinking about this. What next? So if this happens, what are the potential range of implications from this? And then being able to say, how would we deal with it in these different scenarios? So you could argue it's scenario planning, but it's real world scenario planning. This is happening to us now. And if people don't think inflation's going to hit, say, 10% in the UK and Europe, I think they're completely blinded. But so what are we going to do in those situations? How does it affect your business plan? How does it affect our ability to deliver? Your cost targets have to go out the window, because clearly pay changes quite dramatically. But what else will need to change? And I think that's what the CRO needs to be focusing on.
Thank you, Jeremy. And the next question, I suppose I have to give to Vijay, because I don't even know what you mean, Jonas. Can digital twin be used for simulations? Vijay, can you take that on? And you're mute. Just Vijay.
Yeah, Katja, I can take that. Katja, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, in terms of very, very good question from, Anas, typically the way we use digital twin, right? They create virtual replicas of your institution and the players within. So one use case where we have been actually working with some of our financial institutions is measuring performance of credit risk strategies, actually aligned to risk appetite, measuring the strategy performance, and we've actually created a twin out of customer behavior and strategy, and ability to continue to monitor the impact of rolling out a new strategy. It could be that an institution wants to roll out a new facility for a specific segment. Is it within a percentage, which is maybe as part of the threshold appetite of potential exposure? What is the behavior? Is that impacting the portfolio? Does that cannibalize the existing strategy? So digital twin is very relevant in these kind of scenarios, and we can also extend this to fraud risk wherever we want to create a replica, simulate, right? And such use cases are very receptive and relevant to apply digital twin. Yeah, Jonas, hope answers your question.
Thank you, Vijay. That really helps. Here is a question from Audrey, and it's quite specific, so I'll leave it open to you guys to answer it. And the question is, what advice do you have with respect to crisply identifying activities for the first line of defense versus the second line of defense, and with respect to the monitoring of investments and escalating only early warning signals and obtaining the right data to quantify and inform risk? Who wants to take that on?
Jeremy, I know it's a bit different between insurance and banking. Do you want to take it? I think this is from the banking side. Do you want to take a shot?
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, the monitoring investments is probably more on the asset manager side, but I agree. Look, I think you've got to define what the role of risk is first. And, as a true second line, you need to be your oversight and control. So you shouldn't be doing as much of the doing. Now, in the pure markets business, that doesn't work entirely as it should, because as CRO, I'm responsible for the risk models, let's say, that calculate the VaR and the counterparty credit risk, and that's within the regulation I have to be. But I also then have my model validation team that also report into me that validate those models. So actually you do have a conflict there, but you need to try and minimize as many of those conflicts as possible. So things like in the credit space, who does the credit risk assessments of counterparties? There is a strong argument to say that should actually be the first line, and then the second line just oversee the work they're doing and making sure that that's being done appropriately. Stress testing, where should that be done, first or second line? We've moved all of it into the first line. The second line sets the framework. We have the ability and authority to ask for scenarios to be run, but those scenarios are all run by the front line. So look, it'll be slightly different in each firm, and it will depend on how you set up your first, second, and third lines. But I think the fundamental question you have to ask is, what is the risk function here responsible for? What's it trying to do? And then you need to push the bits that it shouldn't be doing or isn't mandated to do back into the first line. There will always be challenges on that because no one wants to have their budgets increased, etc. But create that clear separation so that the second line is that control and oversight function.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was actually a very good answer, because it is all about clarity for all parties involved and then accountability afterwards. Now, the last question which I see here in the Q&A, I would like to take into our general last question here, because time is running out. And our general last question is really, how do organizations need to prepare in response for the future of risk enterprise? And I want us to make the third question, which we didn't even get to, the digital part, into it. But let me start here and let me add the question from William to it, because he's asking, how has your organization started to address climate risk and its effect on financial risk? So let me start here with Lisa. Lisa, how do we need to prepare in general for the future? What role does ESG or climate risk play with regards to these kind of duties? And we'll probably let Vijay later on answer a little bit of the digital transformation question. So Lisa, what's your point?
Yeah, I think we're moving back to a little bit what Jeremy was saying before, to answer to one of the other questions, and it's about getting the capabilities and the tools to be able to look at the feedback loops and the second and third order risks to different type of events, because the things that happened the last couple of years prove that it's impossible to foresee exactly what's going to happen, but we know what type of factors that we are vulnerable to. And if we can map out those factors and their dependencies and how they affect different type of business lines within our companies, we can quite easily take whatever event that happens and map it up to our system, and we know more or less what the effect would be. So I think that is something that would benefit for the future if we have those capabilities and tools in place. And moving that onward to climate risk, that's a perfect example for this. We have a totally new, and I'm going to say new, even though it's a couple of years since we admitted that this is a risk, type of systemic risk that normally was more market type of risk or macroeconomic risk. And now you have the climate risk that will hit all our different business lines and all our different processes at the same time in different ways. In order to estimate how that will look like, you need to know your dependencies and your sensitivities in and out.
Well, thank you, Lisa. That's really helpful. With that, let us go to Vijay and add a little bit of flavor to that transformation for the future, in particular with regards to the digital transformation that may be needed to help where we're going.
Hi, Katya. Thank you. This function has to navigate a very complex landscape characterized by today. We heard Jeremy mentioning a lot of data is that today we have interconnected supply chains, multi-channel customer engagement, very legacy infrastructure, right? So, given some of the capabilities that we discussed, outcomes for a CRO function to deliver, smart risk enterprise, right, can be a construct with digital at the core to drive some of these transformations, right? And that is something which to operationalize has to be transitioned in phases. But some of the key building blocks, Katya, in terms of this smart risk enterprise construct, right, is all about data and digital backbone. We heard Germany mentioning and Lisa mentioning time and again about data, quality data. So we need risk insights, we need interventions, timely, very accurate. So data and digital backbone is very critical for that. And the second aspect is, given that risk management value chain is largely judgmental and very manual, can be, wherever it is applicable and relevant, bring in a lot more cognitive automation. Jeremy mentioned about, second line, lot more control function, etc. So we've been actually working with some of our financial institutions, automating both the controls as well as the controls testing, leveraging some of the design patterns in terms of the cognitive automation. So that is another very critical building block of a smart risk enterprise. The third aspect, is about advanced analytics, visualization for strategic, business decisioning. We see a lot of modernizations happening today in terms of the risk architecture, risk model space, etc. Trying to reduce the latency, trying to build in more accuracy, and also leverage some of the design patterns, which from AI digital twin, we heard one of the audience mentioning that. And finally is about new service models. We see that today it is very critical for the CRO function to plug into ecosystem. I think we heard one of the, as part of the poll response, right? How does some of the challenges, right, in terms of the CRO function. So very critical to address that and plug in that loophole is all about ecosystem, because we have to learn from the peers. We have to get some, insights a lot of data coming in, from different financial institutions and insights, right? So such service models where we plug into ecosystem plus open up the risk as a service to the customers. One example, if you may allow, is some of the financial institutions can actually work with maybe SME segment to strengthen their risk frameworks. Thereby, you are actually strengthening the risk framework for your customers and retaining your customer, and thereby obviously strengthening your, the risk-taking ability as well. So these are some of the key building blocks in terms of the smart risk enterprise as a construct to deliver the future of risk enterprise, which all of us define today as different critical capabilities and outcomes. Over to you.
Thank you, Vijay. Before I get to Jeremy, I would like to launch the last poll. And Anna, if you could go straight away to the fourth poll instead of to the third one, because we don't have time anymore. And the last poll is really, what are some of the expected changes that will drive the future of risk enterprise? And one which I personally find very interesting is the ecosystem adoptions for risk insights. Maybe offering risk capabilities to customers and supply chain, new organizations' positions, and new skill demands, technology, AI, risk analytics. Again, you can choose several ones, not just one. And please vote now while I give Jeremy the stage to give us his insight for the future of risk enterprise.
Well, I think, look, risk has got a bright future, actually, because I think hopefully throughout your organizations, you've shown the value of what good risk oversight can do. Be that whether it's in market risk, credit risk, operational risk, all the payments issues that could have happened if things had gone wrong, whether it's financial crime, compliance, whichever area it is. If you've done okay so far through this crisis, then I think it's a massively good advert for risk. And look, we need to continue to evolve. We'll evolve as the business evolves, but I think we also need to evolve as a function. And that will need investment. I think we've all got to shout within our organizations for the investment, because our investment doesn't generally improve the bottom line day one, but it may improve the bottom line over time. But it's shouting loud enough for that argument. And I think it's creating that business case, if you like, for that investment. But it's also developing the capabilities. And this last question really hits at the heart of it, is what capabilities will we need as a risk function in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, etc. Where will the world be? We'd all love to be in a place where actually you just had a few senior risk professionals and all the data and analysis possible is done for you, and we could just make all the decisions. That clearly isn't going to happen. But for me, it's the future of the risk organization is central to the overall organizations that we're in. I think we are, to a certain extent, we're the nucleus around which everything else circles. But it's being just remember, the CRO function is supposed to be the wiser, the calmer person in the room with the ability to influence, but we're not responsible for driving the business forward. That's someone else's job. Leave that to them. That's their accountability. But if you see it going in the wrong direction, that's where you need to call it out. And things will change. The Ukraine war is going to have changed things. We don't know how it will have changed things, but be ready to adapt. Katja, you were talking about it earlier. How quickly can we adapt? How agile are we? We will need to adapt as well. So, you've got a range of potential outcomes. Make sure you survive in all of those outcomes.
And with that, I really, Anna, if you can share what the poll tells us, I would like to share that with the rest of us. So practically new skill demands, in particular around technology, AI and risk analytics, is the highest. And interesting enough, the ecosystem's adaptation and the offering risk capabilities to customers is fairly low. However, I would like all of you to think about that. And with that, we are coming to an end, and I've just given the okay to run over for a minute or so. If every one of you can please just finish with one last short sentence, with regards to the future of risk management? And let's start with Vijay.
Okay, Katie, just to summarize, right, CRO role has evolved to include very expansive, broad-ranging responsibilities as they create this future of risk enterprise, right? There are a lot of critical capabilities to be uplifted, enhanced, and smart risk enterprise is one of the construct to actually deliver, bring in a lot more advanced AI digitization to deliver those future of risk, capabilities. And CRO of the future is one who embraces the strategic role beyond compliance and takes advantage of this potential, opportunities to enable growth and competitive advantage. That's how I would summarize. We see a lot of emerging risk today, a lot of opportunities. I heard Lisa generally mentioning not just downside, right? There's a lot of upside opportunities and potential. So I think we need to watch out and enable the business to grow and create that competitive advantage.
Thank you, Vijay. Let's move to Jeremy. What's your last statement?
My last statement is, look, I think I summed it up previously. The future's bright, but just stay focused on the job. Make sure you've created a culture within the firm that allows people to speak up. Speak up to you. As the CRO, you need to hear different opinions. You need to surround yourself with people that will give you those different opinions and the different insights. And actually working from home is even more important to have those. You don't pick up on the buzz that's going on in the office. You don't pick up on the chatter and the banter or those conversations by the lifts. So you need to create that network to make sure you have that, to understand what the culture of or the direction that the culture of the firm is heading in, and make sure it's heading in the right direction.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Lisa, what is your last statement for us and the audience?
I completely agree with Jeremy with the culture. It's getting much, much more important to set the right culture. But in addition to that, I would just say that working very, very closely with the strategy team and the strategy processes, I think that's the other side of what we're doing. And if we work together, then we can be very, very successful.
I couldn't agree more. You've all said it beautifully. And with that, I thank you all. I thank the audience for the interaction. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the week, despite all the challenges we are facing.